Thank you everyone for making the time to get into this workshop. I think this is the first virtual workshop that I'm trying to do. I have done workshops face to face or with my customers on one, and that's a little bit different. Uh, let's introduce ourselves and we'll go into the agenda. So let's start with you, Cole. If you can introduce yourself for everyone here, please.
Yeah. My name is Cole Weiler. I'm CEO and founder of a company called Eyes. We focus on quoting automation for industrial distributors. With a focus on fasteners. And prior to this, I had spent my career doing procurement and operations consulting at McKinsey, where a lot of that was spent working with industrial companies, figuring out ways for them to become more efficient and grow their business. But also a lot of that was spent buying parts from industrial distributors. And so when Nelson reached out about the idea for running this workshop, was really excited to be able to take some of the things that we have conversations with distributors on and help help other folks walk through how they can improve their businesses and take learnings and focus on the things that are important.
Yeah, thank you, Cole. Well, my name is Nelson Valderrama. I'm the founder of Intualize. We do price and inventory optimization for distributors. We love the mid-sized distributors, and we have distributors in the fastener, MRO, and Janssen industry. And again, this workshop is for you guys. So two things to remind you. One is that we'll be sharing with you a couple of files. So this is interactive for you guys to use the files on your computer. And the second thing is that there at the bottom of the screen, you're going to see a Q&A. And please feel free to send us any questions as we go with this on the stuff. So how this is going to work is Cole is going to be our distributor in this case on this workshop. So Cole is going to do pretending to be a distributor, and he's going to fill out some of the forms, and we're going to have an interaction between Cole and myself. So he's mimicking your experience out there. We don't have access to any of the files that we'll be sharing with you guys, so that will be owned by you and so forth. And the second thing is that you have any questions, any comments, feel free to put in QA. If there are more in-depth questions at the end of this workshop, we'll be sharing with you guys Cole and my email. So you guys feel free to reach out to either of us doing this. All right. So I'm going to share kind of the agenda for today, and then we start working on this. So the 4P framework that we have basically is we start with the preparation guide, which is we're going to go over 31 projects that distributors can do. That's around 15 minutes. Then we go over problems. This is how to turn symptoms into problem statements, and that's going to be around 15 minutes. We're going to go to the proof, which is understanding the evidence and how to quantify the problems that you guys have. Here, we're going to do maybe one or two examples at the most. This is the part that takes the most, in any workshop. So we just give you a flavor of that. And again, if you guys wanted to do deeper, you guys can do it with Colo or myself. And then we go into the priority 2x2 metrics that you guys can create. So that's kind of the agenda we have. We want it to be around 70 minutes, but again, between questions and answers, I'm pretty sure maybe running to the 80 minutes. So that's what we have.
And I think one thing just happened here too, Nelson, is when you and I initially talked about this, I think the thing that's important is I mean, we're both speaking with distributors all the time, and there's plenty of different problems to work on. And so the real goal here is, uh, to focus on what's important to your business, and for everyone, it's going to look a little bit differently. And we just wanted to walk through, what we found helpful through conversations with distributors of getting down to which ones you actually want to work on. I think that, even as someone who's, focused on a specific area within distribution, I think for some distributors, quoting might not be something that's, an area they need to focus on. And so the real goal here is to figure out how do you find the area for each business that you want to be investing your money in. So you're not spreading your time and effort around 10 different projects that might be lower value.
Exactly, yeah. Because we have more projects that we have time for, right, or money for. So the whole idea is to prioritize those projects here. All right. So let's just start. So in the chat, I share a link of Google Doc. So if you guys have Google, you can open this one. If you guys have, Excel or any other spreadsheet software. Just create a copy of this in your computer locally. We'll be walking over those ones.
And those who are not familiar with, who are not using Google Sheets often, just under the File tab at the top, there's Make a Copy button that will let you create a version you can edit.
Yeah, perfect. All right. So we'll give you some time, you guys, to download this. And again, it should be a super simple file for you guys to have it. All right. So now let's go, Cole. Let's pretend that you are a distributor and we can go over this.
Sure. So I'm going to go open my instance. So I created a copy here, and Nelson had come up with a list of 31 different problems that he sees typically. I think this is pretty exhaustive based off what I've seen too. But what we wanted to do is walk through some of these quickly and show how you would discuss around, how you would score for yourself. And obviously, this, if there's a problem here missing, always be able to add, another project that you think is important. But these seem to cover a lot of like the main topics. So we'll walk through a couple and show kind of like what the intent here is. If I was a distributor running a business, how I would be thinking about this. And then some of these might be a little bit more complex. And so I'll have to ask Nelson for some of his explanation on what this problem might look like for a distributor. So something like pricing optimization, for my business, we are putting cost plus on everything, and we give our team a lot of leeway. So I think this is something probably more severe because I really see an opportunity for us to be focused a little bit more on optimizing that margin, and we're probably giving it away a lot of the time. On the order margin visibility, we can see it throughout the month, but I don't know if we're really focusing on it like we should. So it's probably an area for us to improve, but I don't know if it's as strong as it could be. So this would kind of be the idea, thinking through for your business how each one of these is being executed today and how severe of a problem you think it is. With 3 being, hey, this is a significant problem, we're losing money, and something around 1 or 0 being maybe we run into this every once in a while, but it's not a serious issue.
Yeah. And
So a lot of these.
yeah,
Oh,
sorry to
sorry.
interrupt you, Cole. And something quite
No.
important here for the people that are in the workshop or are listening to this recording is that when you guys run over these, the idea is that you don't spend, 2 hours trying to go over these. The idea is that you guys go over these like in relatively fast fashion, and you can also note if this is something that you have no idea, right? Because maybe you're in operations and you're filling it out and you don't know any about sales. Maybe you are in finance and you have no idea in the specific things. So the idea is that you're able to go over these in a relatively fast fashion just to prioritize, to know what you know and what you don't know.
Yep, it's a great point. So some of these that we'll touch on are just the ones that might be a little bit more specific. So for a lot of these distributors that at least I'm working with, estimating takeoffs maybe not something that they're running into, but if you're working with contractors, might be an area. I would be curious, Nelson, if you could walk through kind of, the one that I hear come up a lot, but would be curious to hear your thoughts on is this warehouse management, and maybe this voice picking one too, or two that I'm not as familiar with.
Sure, definitely. So as Cole mentioned, there are some of things here with asterisk where these are basically something that is super hyper focused on a specific vertical. So you guys can skip those ones. So in warehouse management, this is about basically if you still doing your pick and list with paper and you don't have any way to automate it. This is something particular in terms of efficiency that you wanted to look into, either by pulling parts, picking parts, packaging everything. That's what the warehouse management can help you with. Voice picking is quite advanced, so this typically happens with warehouses that are quite large, right? So this is not for everyone.
Gotcha.
Thinking with
Okay. So, and I'll put a 0 here if it's not applicable
exactly,
to,
exactly,
and
yeah,
allow us to move through quickly.
yeah,
But as we go through these, happy to call another couple of examples. But if you all have any questions about any of them or they're not clear, that's where Nelson and I want to be able to be a resource. So feel free to throw it in the Q&A. But the goal should really be, for your business, which are the ones that stand out to you the most, and you probably have already come across these or had conversations on which ones of these are going to be the biggest problems versus some are probably going to be ones you're not coming across as often.
yeah.
So I'll go through and I'll continue moving through these a little bit more quickly. Like I said, I'm just kind of randomly picking these through, but for you all, picking the ones that are applicable to your company and being able to fill them out. But the real objective here is out of this 31 projects, like I said, pretty well, uh, pretty well exhaustive. The real goal here is to be able to come down to the end of this and see how many of these are urgent and then how many of these are level two problems. And so what we'll come back through here and do is, okay, we have one, two, three, four, five. So five out of this 31 are this urgent level. And then one, two, three, four, five are this level two. And so now I know that out of all of these 31, like 10 of them are the ones worth actually focusing on. And after this, what we're going to want to do for this is really, like Nelson said, if you want to go out and focus on everything in business, it sometimes makes it a lot really difficult to actually go get any of these projects to completion. So the goal for this workshop is to really just focus in on the top couple of projects. So for this case, we're just going to go and pick three. And so when I look through here, out of those five, which are the three that are, kind of keeping you up at night? And so we'll go pick this pricing optimization and urgent, looking at each month. We have orders go out that are margin negative. So obviously, this is a really big problem for us. We're losing money on certain orders, and these aren't strategic orders. This is just areas where our team didn't have all the information, and as prices changed, we weren't getting this out the door effectively. We'll pick this one, quoting. I get feedback from my customers. We aren't responding quick enough, and we're losing business.
Yeah.
So really the focus is just really quickly going and labeling which ones are the most important, but using this as a way to at least narrow that list down so we're not evaluating all 31. So I can go through and do the rest of these, but hopefully this is a good explanation. If there's any questions, but I think Nelson, the goal from here is for everyone to go through on their own and fill these out. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the idea there. So let me share my screen. I want to show you guys, how the form may look like completed here. And again, this is something that we took from some of the workshop that we have done, that I have done with my customers on this one. So this may be something looking like this, right? Like everything is filled out, and then at the end you can see the projects that's called show you, and all the projects. And actually this is real data, right? So when I talk with this with one of our customers, they say, hey Nelson, top three priorities is too hard for me to choose, right? I wanted to have all the projects here, and I said that's fine, you can have it. This is for you, and something that's going to happen as you are moving on towards this is that you are going to review this one, two, three times just to make sure that the projects are there, the priorities are there, and that you know what's going on. Something that I will encourage you guys to do as you are doing this is to describe what is this urgent, right? And this is just from the top of your mind, because that's going to help out tremendously with all the team that you guys have to establish what is urgent or not. So this is kind of the prep work. And again, the idea today is not just to fill everything out, but at least fill out something. The structure that we have created, I will use 30 seconds for this. If you guys can see here these titles. So happen with some of our customers that they are very margin and revenue oriented, right? So they wanted to go first to that specific topic and talk about that. There are other people that are more on the sales efficient side. There are people that are in operation side. And the reason why we club this is because you can go over all of them at once, or you can go to a specific buckets here, depending on who you have in your company. Maybe you want to do this as a team. So you wanted to go and talk with operations and talk about everything operations, talking about inventory and cash, and talking about finance and risk. Also, something that you can see here that happened is with a customer of ours. They say, well, Nelson, I don't see anything in e-commerce. So I said, no problem, just add it there. 32, 33, 4, 34. Did you own this? So you can put any project that you don't know or you haven't noticed here, you can put it. This you own this, so you go over that. But that's the whole idea. So going back to the summary, we went through the prep work. So that's something that we have accomplished. So now let's go over let me go quickly over the audience just to see if there's any question here or someone else about this. And any one of the participants. All good? All right. So now let's go over the problems example. which is the second one.
Yeah.
So
Let me pull,
yeah, so
let me
what I'm
pull
going
that
to
up
do,
really.
yeah, what I'm going to do here is going to show you guys kind of the form fill out already, and you guys can see here I have pre-populated 5 different projects, and I wanted to go one by one, so you guys we can understand first kind of the. I want to hide this quickly, and I want to show you. So what we have been witnesses of after we do this with our customers is that what we have is symptoms. So what they told us are symptoms. They are not telling us what is the problem. So they say, well, I have issues because I cannot process all my orders fast. I have problems because I'm not able to enter all my quotes. I have a problem because I am not too fast to send out quotes. I have a problem because my pricing is not right. My e-commerce is slow. So those are all symptoms, but we wanted to transform those symptoms into really problem statements. And what we wanted to propose here is how we can use this if then statement, right? That we can have it here. So this is a symptom in terms of we're swimming in stuff that doesn't move, right? The problem statement is if 22% of our SKUs have zero turns and 1.2 million seats in dead stock, then we're tying up our working capital that earns nothing. And then the if that really help out the human brain is if we right size safety stock and clear that inventory, then we free up $300,000 in cash and reduce expedite costs. And this is something that typically owners or CFOs or finance people, that are the ones that are going to sign out the projects they love. They want to say, I wanted to do something like this. Okay? So I'm going to share with you guys another sheet. And the idea is that we will go over this sheet with Cole. He pretending to be a distributor. And if you guys have any questions, uh, I want you guys to raise your hand. So here in the chat, you're going to have the file. I think the same instruction that Cole provided last time, which is just copy in your computer and you can progress. All right, Cole, let's go with you then. So let's pretend of the projects that you choose. Let's try to go over some of the symptoms and the
Yeah,
problems.
sure. So let me share my screen again and we'll pop between these two tabs. But, and I bias pick the ones that, Nelson's most likely familiar with and that I see every day, but we'll pick another one too in here. Um, so we pick pricing optimization, quote RFQ. Let's also see some in inventory. It's actually a topic I'm not as familiar with.
Yeah.
Um, so, and what I'll add this real quick, we'll pull those in there, but looking at something like pricing, I think that's when we talked about. So I'm going to come over to my problems tab and I'll put pricing optimization um,
The project.
as the project. Yep. And so, we talked about this, but some of the things I'm feeling or some of the things I'm hearing is we are sending out orders that are negative margin. So obviously, gross margin. So obviously they're not going out the door negative margin, but after we put on all of our costs, we're going out negative margin. And that's just not going to be okay. There's a discrepancy between different branches. So some of our branches do really well, and some are not doing as well on the same products. And maybe categories that used to perform well are dropping. Okay. So obviously our sales team feels this,
Yeah.
and our finance team is feeling this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm actually not super familiar with the problem behind how to do pricing optimization well. I mean, I know at a high level, but I think what we've seen and what Nelson was referring to is that obviously these are really good symptoms to recognize, but it doesn't really allow us to go and fix a problem or identify if it's something that we can actually go action. So I think this is where we want to be able to actually turn this into a problem statement and figure out what can we do to actually then go fix that problem. So I don't know, and Nelson, I'd be curious considering this is your area of expertise here. But one thing that comes to mind for me would be, if we aren't using a standard pricing scheme for each product, then it becomes difficult to know, for the team to know if the sale will be accretive. And I think this is what I've seen when I've had this conversation is, the sales team is really familiar with the margin that they're going to be getting on that product, but a lot of times it's hard to bake into freight costs on that or how long they've been holding that inventory or where that's moving in the market. And I think that is typically what we see. There's a lot of freedom in kind of how pricing decisions are made, and a lot of the team might be familiar with the product itself, but not the other costs that are going to go into the P&L. So is there another example here, Nelson, you want us, give as a good example for pricing optimization?
Yeah, what I hear from my customers is that the statement is if we have a standard and credible pricing that my sales team can use,
Okay.
then I will be able to onboard new people easier, for example, right? So it's not just about what happened with your current state, but as well as business continuity. And this is what pricing really plays big time, right? Because what people has in their brains for 10, 20 years, like my generation, is something that you cannot replicate in your generation call, right? It's just going to take you don't have 10 years, right, to learn what I learned in the last, 30 years. Right? Business don't have that option anymore. So this is something that I hear continuously on the pricing. It's not just about making more money, is making sure that the salespeople, can, make more money because, the incentives that they have. But for the business is business continuity. So that's the idea there. The idea is this problem statement that you guys spend some time to really break things down, right? In if-then statements that can help you out to unlock that potential that you may have kind of in your, in your business.
Yeah,
So
I
we
think
did
the
hear,
other
go ahead.
I think the other important thing to call out, I mean, even in this example, we gave two different problem statements, but I think that's really why this is so different than the symptoms is there's a lot of different problems that could lead to these symptoms. But it's important to know which of these problems is actually the issue for your business rather than, hey, there's, a problem, an outcome that's happening that's not ideal, but actually figure what is the problem here?
Yes,
Because some folks might feel like it's easy to onboard new sales reps, but they and that's not how they're thinking about it. Or their team's been around for a while, and so they're not as worried about that, but maybe they've given their team too much leeway on this. And so I think that is really important why the problem statement is a completely different concept than the symptom itself.
exactly. Yeah. Let's try to do another one, Cole, please.
Sure. Yeah, I'll do this inventory. This one I'm not as familiar with, so I think this will actually be helpful to go through. So I don't know. Some examples I can think of in inventory optimization is um, we have products sitting on our shelves that are nearing expiration, which is never good. I had a customer who had this with some tension control bolts, and it was from a mistake that was made 10 years ago, but it's something like, how do you think about that going forward? Customers are calling, or actually, I'm worried about not having inventory for important customers. I think that's another one I hear pretty often. And so that kind of leads to the other direction of, all right, well, I can't limit what I have. Um, I need to hold more on a shelf. I'm not sure when to drop ship
Yeah,
versus hold
exactly.
inventory. It's
Exactly.
another example, I think. And so a couple different symptoms. The main one in this, I think this one's a little bit more complex, but obviously like we're tying up working capital.
Yeah. What I hear from salespeople, if we go there and who feel is like we don't have the right things, we don't have the right stuff to sell, right? I'm not selling because I don't have the right stuff, right, in the shelf. Right? That's something that salespeople may say. And then if you talk about finance, right? Finance is like we have too much stuff, right? We have too much stuff invested. Sell whatever we have there, right? And the owner is like, well, we cannot grow this thing. I mean, I cannot invest all this money all the time. So this is one of the ones that I'm pretty sure a lot of the distributors are going to have different opinions
Yes.
from different people, right, on how to go there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too, because immediately when I think about this, I've had this conversation, mainly I've spent a lot of my time talking to folks in sales and purchasing, but I was recently at a distributor and we were talking to the warehouse team, and their issue was they have a big warehouse and they felt like um, they spend a lot of their time, moving through stuff that never ended up selling. Now, granted, that's a warehouse management problem too, but I think, depending on who you talk to, there's going to be different symptoms. And so, especially if your role isn't all encompassing, I think it's good for this part to be able to collect feedback from other people and see, hey, are the symptoms all aligned, or does finance and sales probably have completely different objectives when it comes to something like this. Sales team wants
Exactly.
to hold as much as they can. All right,
Exactly.
so
Yeah. Let me share
what
my
would
screen. Cole, I want we
sure.
complete the problem statement because I wanted to go over something that I found out actually one of my customers yesterday, and I think some of your people listening to this workshop they will be interested. So these are five examples that we have here with a fake company, right? And we have order automation, and we have quote and RFQ automation, right? And again, this is all fake data. So I wanted to ask you here in terms of symptoms and problem statement, what you have seen with your current customers, right? I found out that there are two camps in distribution. People that feel or believe that order entry automation is one problem with certain symptoms, and it should be treated differently than the quote and RFQ automation. They see these two processes that, depend on each other but are different, right? And there are other camp of people that they are saying, no, that's just one thing, right? So with my customers, I'm 50 and 50. There are people that are in one camp and people that are in the other camp. But what I wanted to go over with you on this one is in the order entry automation. What kind of symptoms do you see or do you see out there, and which are the ones that you're looking for quote and RFQ automation?
Sorry, is it directed towards me, Nelson?
Yes, please. Yes, please,
Oh
Cole.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to this, the symptoms that we're hearing,
Yes, exactly. Yes.
yeah. So what I'm typically seeing is the main one, and the reason like why we do this is uh, we respond the next day and the customer told us the quote was over, and so I think that's really common to see is that this. The amount of speed required for returning quotes has really gone up, especially now with e-commerce and folks moving more quickly and the industry kind of staying flat, it's become really important to win every piece of business you can. The other piece too is that, especially for companies that are split between sales and sourcing team, the sales team feels like, hey, I throw it over to the sourcing team and I'm not sure when I'm going to get the quote back. So a lack of visibility into where the quote is in the process. Did I send the quote back to the customer and I haven't responded to them yet and I haven't gotten a follow up? When should I reach out? So I think that's another one is not only the speed of getting the quote back, but then also being able to track that quote as it moves through your company to be able to know,
Mm,
hey, I'm actually supporting this customer like I want to. So those are the two that I would hear most often is that, we're not responding quickly enough. The last one too is that like I'm not actually going out and doing sales. So I spend a lot of my time working on quotes. I'm not calling on customers. I'm not drumming up business. I don't have that opportunity because that's where my day is tied up.
that's awesome. Yeah. Okay. So if you guys are listening to this, that would be the idea. Just those are examples, call providing to any of these two buckets. So again, I just put it out there because again, I was very impressed, but 50% of my customers believe, this is two processes and one of them is like the same process. But based on what you're saying, I think quite important, even the sourcing side is something that is not here as a symptom, but it's a very important one, right? When they have
Yeah,
this
and
divided functionality here. And I think this is how important it is because if I ask just the salespeople, I will get some symptoms if I don't ask the sourcing people, right? If I add here the sourcing people, they're going to say other things, and we should be able to capture those ones in the symptoms as well the problem statement as well, right?
yeah, and I think to that point, what we spend a lot of time with our customers doing is mapping actually the process of for each distributor where a quote moves. And this doesn't have to be for quoting, but for any of your business processes, who is actually touching it? Because for
Yeah.
some companies, inside sales might be handling the whole process, and so they're going to feel something different. But for a lot of companies, it might be viewed as a sales operation, but sourcing or operations team is really critical to it. And until you map that out, you might be missing, hey, there's someone else here we need the input of.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, I think it happens in all of this. In any of these projects, we're inviting you guys listening to this that really to us, every people that are involved in the process, right? That's quite important. It takes time. So there is no magic recipe here, right? Neither Cole or myself, even in our own businesses, can run this by ourselves. We ask, our team, what is what they're feeling, and for them to describe. And when you are able to copy that into the symptoms and then the problem statement is great. So for everyone, if you guys go over this and you have challenges, coming with the problem statement, you can reach out to us. We're happy to help you guys to translate that into a problem statement or enhance or asking more questions on that one. All right, perfect. So let's go to where we are. We're right on time. Prep guy done. Problems done. Let's go to the proof part, right? And the proof one, believe it or not, is one of the ones that it takes even more time, but it's a good investment of your time. And here's try to prove map out the evidence what we have. So here's a couple of examples of that we put together for the workshop in terms of the different projects that you guys can have. And I wanted to focus on, let me hide here, these ones. All right. So one of the things that I wanted to mention to you guys, let me hide these. So is kind of the concept here. So the concept first is to make sure that there is a method what you guys are using to capture that information. And again, there are many ways to do that. I just put here, or we put here, three different options. The first one is a quick survey that you guys can do. You can use, if you guys use Google, it could be a Google survey. You use Microsoft. Microsoft has their own thing as well, a form that you can fill out, that you can send it out to inside sales, sourcing people, purchasing people, operations. What my advice is, don't go beyond 5 questions because it's a lot of time. So you wanted to make sure it's few time. It's going to take you 1 to 2 days, and it's going to take you a week or less to get information. The other way is a one-to-one conversation, as Cole and I were having right now in a team. I found these quite important, in teams that are, sharing the same space. You can do it inviting breakfast, inviting lunch, and you can do it an hour and just having a conversation with them and capture that information. The other one is if you guys can kind of pull data from any of your systems, ERP, CRM, name it, right? Whatever you guys have to make that happen. And here's the minimum, what I call minimal viable validation that I put here is basically what is the minimum that you wanted to have? Three people to confirm the problem exists. So three inside sales, three outside sales, three people in sourcing. They have at least one quantifiable metric. And, kind of if we don't fix this, what is the consequence, right? So capturing that information is quite important. And the other thing that I wanted to expose you guys are bands. But bands pretty much are like ranges that you guys can have when you are uh, walking through this part, and we'll show you how that works. But cannot help you out instead of putting a specific number, right? Kind of, what would be the range that you guys wanted to use. All right. So that's kind of the concept there. Let's go over some of the examples here. So let's go into the inventory optimization, one of the call had selected, right? So the idea here is what kind of evidence can you pull? You can pull, the data stock from your ERP system. Most of the companies have this. What percentage of discounts has no terms whatsoever? Most of the ERP systems can have that kind of reporting. Expedite freight. You have any of that? And if we have lost orders or no, right? So this section is about all the evidence that you can pick, the evidence that you need, right? That's the other one. With my customers, this is the part where they spend most of the time, which is like, okay, I have this information, but I don't have the stock out frequency by category. And I wanted to know that, right? I know this, but I don't have the low sales from back orders. And that's something that they thought about it, but they never was able to really to get the time. And this is where you can say, who can get this information from me in each of the different projects, right? So let me ask you, Cole. I know that you have been going over this with many of your customers for like order entry or quote automation. So any any ideas here, or what are the main challenges that they're experiencing on this data?
Yeah, I think I think the main thing that I would think about with this is, what data do you have easily accessible? Sometimes it's not obvious. So there's a lot of data that lives within your ERP. And what we often see is a lot of times there might be one individual on your team, or we also see working with your ERP provider itself themselves to go figure out like, hey, is there a report somewhere I can go pull that
Yeah.
might have this? Especially if you're working on a problem that you haven't spent as much time on before. It might be something that you need to look into. The other piece though is so like first, making sure you can go out and check what do you already have. The more often problem I see though is that a lot of this data isn't something you're tracking. So for instance, this is a great example. We work with a lot of customers, and I really don't see average quote time being tracked that often, and I don't see win rate by response time being tracked at all, to be honest. And so that's something that where if you don't have it, but you think that's really important to be able to understand what the effect is having on your business, that might be where you need to actually go out and figure out how can I really quickly get a good baseline of this data. And I think what's important for me is not, we have this at 99.9% accuracy, but within an order of magnitude, I have a pretty good idea that our win rate goes up by 10% if we're able to get it back in 4 hours instead of 24 hours. And being able to do maybe a way to, working with your sales team to either collect that anecdotally through the survey or actually going out and, keeping track for a week on those quotes is a really good way to get that. But I think what I would focus on is what evidence do you actually have today? And then is something really important. How do you go quickly get that? I think the other piece too is, is this something you want to be tracking more robustly going forward? Such as, do you find that average quote time is something you need to actually track? In that case, maybe a quick time study isn't the right answer. But if you decide this is a project you're going to prioritize, that might be part of your project is actually creating the metrics that allow you to track it going forward. But I think a lot of distributors don't have, some of this evidence you need data readily available. And so really getting creative on how you can collect it is really important because otherwise it's hard to know whether or not it's something worth working on and how much ROI you're going to get out of it.
Yeah. So let me ask you a follow-up question on that call. I was with a customer, I think Tuesday or Monday, doing this. And when we're working on the order entry automation, one of the things that they mentioned on the evidence they wanted to know is how much time their salespeople were actually investing in order entry, right? And there was the CFO and the CEO, and they didn't know, right? They know that the people were spending a lot of time, and they were doing like a ballpark number. Say, well, I think between 2 3 hours per day, right? So I have a question for you because I'm pretty sure you have these conversations with many of your customers. Any tip about how or what is the best way to capture that kind of information, and what is enough, right, in order to capture that information so they feel
Yeah,
comfortable?
Yeah, so I mean, if you really want to capture that accurately, there's obviously need for a solution in place. And so, something that we focus on and a lot of other solutions focus on is actually tracking how long you're spending on these products. It's not something typically that's like inherent to an ERP. It's just
Mm.
going to be is a little bit more tricky. But even something like this, where my mind immediately goes to is backing into that number. So if you have dedicated order entry folks like this alludes to, and you're doing 1,000 orders a month, there's a really good idea to focus on, okay, it seems like we're probably spending, a fair amount of time on each of those to be able to get that. Each person's doing 300 a month and so they're only doing about 10 a day. And so we're about spending, 3/4 of an hour on each one. And that's a really quick way to back into that. And, being able to then go check and follow up with a couple of your order entry people to see, hey, are you spending about 45 minutes on these? I think is a good way to validate that. But if you really want to get accurate, that's where it's going to require something. But for the purpose of this, I think sort of being creative and figuring out how you can get that answer is pretty doable. And I think a lot of this is tracked in the ERP. You just might not obviously think of it until you go and figure out a calculation that might get you there quicker than doing an intensive time study.
Exactly, yeah. And that's what we put here, the band. So that was kind of, what I was talking with my customer, not knowing the answer that you provide to them is that's what we do, the different, the three bands, right? What would be a conservative number that you feel super comfortable about it in terms of, 2 hours, right? That's, at minimum per day. And what would be a number that would be completely outrageous, they are taking all the time to do this. So this is how these bands can help you out in each of the projects that you guys decide to go about it. So that way you have like three different options. And when you go to the next stage, you already have, kind of ballpark that, right? So you don't, as Cole said, you don't need to have a super, intense, 6 months, study. That's what I see some people trying to do. Like they wanted to have plus minus 1%. Doesn't matter. What you wanted to know if it's a 5,000 problems, it's a $50,000 problem, or it's a 5 million problem, right? That's what the owners wanted to know. And this is what, the discussion should be, geared towards in terms of,
Yeah,
proof, right?
something I was going to ask you on how you do this with your customers, Nelson. But the first thing comes to my mind, I'm very used to doing ROI calculations. It's what I spent a lot of my time doing previously, and I know you can go. I pretty much think after your past five inputs, the calculation's just going to get more and more complex, not easier. And sometimes it can take a fair amount of time or experience to think through that. Is that kind of where you guide your customers towards? Is like, hey, keep it under a certain amount of inputs, or use an 80/20 rule where as long as the input is within 10%, your final answer is going to be somewhere in the right direction, or how do you think about simplifying it? Because I do know for some problems, ROI calculations can get pretty complex.
Yeah, always, I mean, I use definitely two things here. The 80/20 that you said, Call, trying to go for the 80/20. I mean, that's, obvious to do with the business where we're talking with them. And the second thing is the complexity, right? So you mentioned something, for example, when they talk about, they are losing sales, or my people is using this time, or this is affecting sourcing, doing these 30 years in distribution, I smell that it's a bigger problem. And that makes sense for them to dig into that part. Compare with, for example, nothing wrong with AP and AR, right? Accounts payable, account receivable, which is relatively straightforward. When I ask them, how long are you spending? And they say, well, for accounts payable, reconciling, invoices and, is maybe 2 hours, and paying is 10 minutes because I have everything automated, to send an ACH. So that's straightforward. You don't need to invest too much time into that because it's just one or two people doing it, and it's very good to go. But when it's a complex problem, definitely you want it to be. I agree with you having 3, 4 data points, but especially from the different people playing into that role, so you really understand how big the problem is, right? So that would be kind of what I said to my customers, and also is like try to make sure that the proof matches your gut feeling or vice versa, right? So I think you and I
Yeah,
talk about this. Like a lot of people, they have like a problem. I think this customer says, speed on my e-commerce. What do you mean with that? Can you describe to me the problem, right? And when they describe the problem, you can go into the proof. And again, e-commerce is relatively easy because everything is in the e-commerce platform, right? And you can quantify that. So I think it goes good with the problem, right? And the hierarchy that you have.
yeah, I think it's a good. It's funny when you said that, it brought something to mind. I mean, one piece you touched on is I do think assumptions are really important for something like this. I know it's not always comfortable to use an assumption, but I use a lot of simplifying assumptions when I'm doing stuff. Hey, I think someone, great example that people work 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
Really easy way just to be able to simplify it. The other one though is the checking. You mentioned that of like if we talk about something like order entry, and you think you can save $200,000 worth of time on order entry a year, but you have one person doing order entry and they make 65 grand a year, then like probably something went wrong there. And so I agree that that's being able to check it from an alternate angle is probably a good way to make sure you're headed down the right path.
Yeah. And just the bands, right? Going back to your example, if you got 250, that would be a too aggressive for me. I would say, what would be your conservative? What would be the bare minimum that you think is going to be? And maybe you can go, oh, it's 2 hours per day, multiplied by 20 days, working days in a month. They make this money, and just put it out there, right? So I like bands because that help you out to kind of get some guide rails about the project. I think ROI, what you said, a lot of time the issue has to do with both things. One is how much you are making and how much it's going to cost you, right? The whole idea is to be as accurate as possible on those ones. And if you don't know, you don't know. That's the thing. If you don't know, just put it out there. I don't have an idea, and just make sure that you do your homework on that one. All right.
Yep, for
So
sure.
as I mentioned, proof is going to take some time on your side for people, you guys doing it. And again, I wanted to repeat it. If you guys have any challenge or question, you can reach out to Cole and myself, and we'll be more than happy to help you out. All right, let's go to the scoring side. So, in the scoring side, basically, these are the two concepts. One is about measuring the impact that that's going to have for your business. and the other one is going to be the complexity. And I'm going to go one by one. You guys can see here that we have some scoring and we have 4 buckets. I love buckets and I put it here as Cole mentioned to simplify things. So this one, something anyone can understand here. And you guys can see here the 4 different attributes: revenue, margin, working capital, and capacity. Those are the 4 ones that I found that everyone agree with it, that everyone understand, and that is easy to quantify. So the idea is that when you guys are going through the project, you guys either choose 1 or 2 attributes and quantify how much is going to be delivered to your business. And we'll provide you some examples here. Again, and you guys can change this as well. Maybe this is not the way you guys wanted to do it. This is an idea on how you guys are going to do it. And I will do an exercise about that. The second one is the complexity scoring, right? And again, in this case, we put it in inverse order. So 9 to 10 is really low. It's quick wins. This is timeline. And again, this is what we're suggesting. You guys can change it and say, well, for me, if it's not 3 months, it's a month or 6 months, The whole idea is that you guys have the meaning, a timeline defined, the integration, right? This is quite important because most of these projects are technological projects and they don't live in a vacuum. They somehow need to integrate it somehow. And the risk level, right? So this is just the framework that you guys can use. And something quite important here is that you wanted to do this project by project independently. With everyone that I have done this, they wanted to do at once. They wanted to do the scoring and they wanted to have a prioritization. And that's not the way to do it. Let's do the scoring first, and then you can prioritize that part. So that's kind of the framework that we have here. And these are a couple of the projects that we have. Put it out there. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to share this with you guys in my chat. And we go with you, Cole, for you to go over this with the 2 projects that you choose.
Yeah. So let me go roll my screen up real quick. I saw a question too around the proof. I don't know if it was thrown in the chat or not, Nelson. But
Oh, yeah.
okay. So what we'll do is let me go back over to another tab and we'll pull in pricing optimization. I think the thing that's nice about this also is you don't have to do one-to-one. So that's a really nice thing with these scoring bands is that revenue, obviously very difficult to turn revenue into capacity, but being able to level set them as far as these are all super important is a good way of doing this. So for this, we're going to say this is a 9 because we're going to see a margin improvement here. And I think that's one really easy to know of, after based on that proof tab and being able to go calculate that. And we're going to make sure we keep track of that here. And then from a complexity, for something like this, I'm not familiar with how you would go about this. And so where I would be curious to hear how you would handle this, Nelson, I see different levels. So I see a way where maybe you could go from, if it's a 3 severity today, and I'm just doing cost plus, maybe I want to move to list price and nothing crazy, but I want to do a one-time list price and I'll update it every 3 months. So not super complex, but maybe I only get 100 basis points versus doing actually dynamic pricing, much more complex, but I'm going to get closer to that 200 to 500 basis points. How would you think about this? Should I be looking at the 9? Should I be looking at the high complexity one? Or should I be looking at, what's the first thing I'm going to do in this evolution?
I think what you asking, Cole, is what every distributor asks me, right? Like, which is the next step that I wanted to take, right? And again, my advice always is let's crawl, walk, and then run, right? And you can try to go from, you know, cost plus to dynamic pricing, and a lot of our customers ask us for that. We said that's going to fail, not because of the technology. The technology is going to deliver to you, but something that we wanted to do here is the risk level, right? Which is not the integration, is the risk level. And the risk level that you can have in that project is that either you're going to disrupt relationship with your customers, or your salespeople is not going to trust or believe the pricing that you're putting out there that is moving all the time, and they're going to be uncomfortable. They are not going to use it, and the price is going to fail, right? So that's why we put the timeline, we put the integration, but as well the risk level that occurs. So if I wanted to say that's a risk level medium, right? I would say if you go with just moving into a price list that you wanted to use, right? And it's something that typically can execute in 3-6 months, and it just have the integration with my ERP system, right?
Yep. And so I think the other thing too, when you talk about that, and so we'll leave it here and we'll put it at 9.7. But I think the other important piece is why that problem statement, going back to this problem statement here, the problem statement we put out was not that if we had dynamic pricing, it was if we
Yes,
had standard compatible pricing. And so I think that's why this problem statement is really important, is to know that the problem we're trying to solve is just coming up with standard pricing. It's not that we're trying to have world-class dynamic pricing that's going to
exactly,
optimize based off of the account. But, and
exactly.
where if you're focused on the symptoms, dynamic pricing is a solution for all of these symptoms too. And so I think that's really where focusing in and honing on this allows you to come back to this this complexity score and know how you're actually going to go about solving it. And so for something like this, we can work on a standard pricing profile and we don't have to go out and do something crazy.
Exactly. And I think what you do, Cole, when we do this, scoring side is really what you are putting those two pieces together. And again, what I ask to my customers when I do for them is actually when they decide this impact and complexity is to put a note, right, in terms of that one. And again, I wanted to tell to everyone, I've done this with my customers, and even within our workshop, during the time, they change their mind. And that's also valid, right? They're saying, you know what, that's not the impact, that's too hard, or that's too low, or the complexity when I start asking them questions about what about the risk level? Have you thought about the integration? Do you have the bandwidth to do it? They start changing things, and that's valid. That's part of what we want to have this framework vivid because you wanted to go over that and working with your team to have something that is final. So yeah, those are good points, Cole. Uh,
It's a good call too of like you have to flush it out during this piece, and it's not that the problem that you came up with in the beginning is the problem you have to be solving at the end. You might find, hey, there's actually an easier way for us to get a good lift. Because I do think a lot of times we want to ambitiously get to best in class or the perfect state, but it's a good example of crawl walk run of fix the main problem that's going to typically be the lower complexity solution, and then move on to the next evolution when you go and you do this 4P review in 12 months from now.
exactly, yeah. Something quite important here that wanted to mention to everyone. Ideally, you wanted to go over all your projects and measuring the impact and the complexity. And there's two reasons for that. The first one is that that's going to help out your team to make sure that they feel that you are listening to them, right? If you go through all this process and you have sourcing people involved and so forth, and they don't see that their voice has been heard and they see the impact or the complexity, it's not going to help you out with something that you wanted to do. That's one thing that's important. The second important here, and this goes for owners and for project managers or for people in operations, is that going over this impact and complexity it and all the flushing out of ideas is really to good put you in a good really position to make a decision on where you wanted to go with this, right? There are so many times where there is low hanging fruit that you haven't go after because you don't want it or because you haven't seen it or the opposite. I have seen a lot of projects called that they go into these score on high major leave and high risk level, right? And they say I wanted to pause that and just put in the parking lot, but people know that those projects were considered and they know why they were not implemented, right? It's not about them, it's not important. It's about that the risk level is too high or it's not the timing. Sometimes it's not the timing. If you have done an ERP change and you are doing an e-commerce change and you are code automation and someone is like, we need to do a PEM or we need to do, warehouse, like we don't have bandwidth. And that's also something that is important. But when you have all these map it out, it's easier to have those discussions instead of having isolated, discussions, leadership and operations people, and then, having all these kind of, thing, this discussion or confusion right in the organization. Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, Nelson. I think that's the other piece is how do these fit into what else your team is working on? It's a good example of, we'll have a lot of conversations with folks who are going through ERP changes. If you're going through an ERP change, that for me should be a singular focus until you
Yeah.
get that smoothed out. And so, you don't want to go, obviously you want to start from a fresh page and a clean slate, but same time, you can really overwhelm your team if you try to change an ERP, implement a new process, and implement a new technology all at the same time. Really good to be able to focus on and kind of which teams are already getting affected. If the warehouse team's just gone through an implementation of something or a big process change, maybe the warehouse management one is one that needs to wait until you're through that, and you can go work on something with the sales team instead in the meantime.
Yeah, that sounds good. So since we're here, Cole, let me ask you a question. So in terms of those two projects, the RFQ automation and the order entry automation, right? In terms of complexity, what is what you have seen with your customers? Have you seen that
Yeah,
all over the place, or you can see it's a range?
it's going to go back to kind of similar thing of what we talked about for the pricing piece of, um, it depends on where you are on your sophistication journey and what your actual goal is. So for some distributors I talk to, everything is getting typed into the ERP manually for orders, for instance, if we focus on that. That is really low hanging fruit. Order entry is a relatively well understood problem now.
Yeah.
And you can immediately free up your times team in relatively just matter of a few weeks versus if you guys are already looking at something like EDI and you have really sophisticated EDI into your biggest customers, and now you're looking at how do I bring that to the next level, that's obviously going to be a much more sophisticated change that you're going to need to go out and do. And so it's really good to know where you are today and where you want to take it to the next stage because you don't have to go from typing in all your orders by hand to now I have EDI connections into my major customers, because obviously that's going to be a massive undertaking and maybe not even headed in the right direction. But that's really where focusing on your current state, I think, is important because it doesn't have to be something that's too big to bite off. It can be something that's really manageable.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. Again, that will help me out with discussion with my own customers about this. But yeah, I think that makes sense. All right, so let's go to the last portion of the workshop. So again, on this one, I've used some projects, right, that came from my example here. Just wanted to put it here. So I have all these things that I score here. I have my projects. So I have this inventory, order entry, quote, knowledge capture, and the impact and the complexity that they have. So let's assume that this is you guys, that you have been able to go over this. You have this attribute. This is quite important, especially when you guys are doing this without a CFO or finance in place. Doing this is extremely important because they're going to ask you when you calculate the ROI where that is coming from. That's quite important. All right, so let's go to the prioritization side. So here on the prioritization side, the idea is for you guys to look into doing this two by two. Again, I have challenges doing this in Google Sheets, so I have to put kind of the chart here. But the idea here is to see the complexity. You have low complexity here, high complexity here. You have impact, low impact here, and high impact here. So we took these these 5 different projects, and we just put, in terms of what are the quick wins, what is the strategic ones, what is the fill-in that we call, right, when resources allow. This is the ones that you wanted to avoid, and this is the ones on the parking lot. So in this case, we can talk about the quadrants. This is the 2x2 that is known. It's very easy to understand. And what you wanted to start is the quick wins, right? In this case, on this specific example, we have inventory optimization. 8.6 is just, the complexity and the impact. Quote RFQ automation and order entry automation. And then you have here on the strategic, which is knowledge capture, right? That has an impact that is, quite important, but the complexity is quite high. Just wanted to make sure that's captured, right? And this credit decisioning, right? This don't pursue, right? Because it doesn't have the impact that you were looking for. So this is the 2x2. And again, if you guys have any questions, any comments on this one, we can help you with this. And again, just from your perspective, Cole, when you have done, 2x2 in the past, what would be some advice or tips that you can provide to the audience?
Yeah, I think what's really important is actually doing it and plotting it out visually because what is important for an example like this is credit decisioning is not something that we want to focus on currently. Now, if this doesn't line up with what your gut feel is, then you need to go back and make sure that, did you do the complexity in value scoring correctly? But I think the value of the 2x2 matrix is it makes it really evident of where you should be focusing your effort. And when you're focusing it, obviously the top right quadrant is what you want to be working on. I think the other thing that's important is it doesn't always have to be what you're maximizing for. So if there's something that's like way up in the the tippy top, then that doesn't, it may be really high complexity, but you're going to get a lot of value out of it. That's where you have to kind of decide, like, hey, is there something else going on? Did we just do another implementation for our sales team? And so maybe that isn't worthwhile. So you can pick something that might not look like the best opportunity, but trying to keep it to that top right quadrant, I think is really important because otherwise you're going to spin your wheels on things that aren't going to really move your team ahead that far.
Yeah, definitely here. And I think these are some of the prompts that we put out there. I think you already mentioned this one, right? Like the math says X, right? Does that match your gut, right? Sometimes like, no, this doesn't make any sense. I think the impact is too high or the complexity is too low or, I don't know. That's the other question that I got from one of my customers. I don't know the complexity, right? I don't know the complexity. How do I know the complexity? And this is where you guys, may need to reach out to, someone that knows that, or doing some research about it to understand the complexity or the impact, right, on those ones. But doing this properly, help out, right? The other one is like, which of these keep you at night, right? That's the other thing. When an owner is looking into this and say, you know what, really for me is the knowledge capture. I mean, where I'm going to, there is 5 people that are going to retire in the next 2 years. I have no idea how I'm going to keep all that. So maybe that's what is keeping him or her at night. That's something that definitely should be put out there. I think I love what you said, like, which is the top quadrant, right? Maybe it's not this one that you wanted to go, but maybe it's this one because your condition as a business is calling you for that, right? If you can only do one this year, which one? We use this one in our company, Intualize, all the time. That's the question. If we have these 10 options, what will be one thing that you wanted to do this year, right? And that helped out you and your team really to prioritize, right? And have discussions. That's something important here. And out of your experience, call. But what I've done, these ones, these change. You have a conversation, you flush out, and these tend to change, right? And some things sometimes change dramatically, but also, help out having those conversations, within the company itself, right? What will change if we move this to a strategic step, right? And that's the whole thing, kind of how to do this negotiation internally. So that's on the 2x2. I don't know any other
Yeah,
comment here, Cole.
one thing that I expect a lot of folks to go through if they do a process like this is they're going to get to the end of it and say, Nelson, I just spent an hour and a half doing this, and I already knew that these are my 3 most important projects. And I think a lot of times that's what I see when doing these with customers is like, you probably already know what's important to your business, but I think it's important to do this anyways because now you're able to not only verify that this is what you should be working on, so it makes you feel extra confident going into the project, but I also think it's really important to make sure the whole business is on board. And so folks that may not be experiencing this as acutely as you are, they can now understand why this is the project that's going forward. So the whole team is in lockstep and it doesn't feel like I don't want to go through a pricing optimization project. They're able to see the fact base that's been pulled together behind it on why it's important. So that's the other thing too is I would be surprised if distributors go through this and they're shocked at the results of what falls in that quadrant. You probably already have a pretty good gut feel, but that's the whole point of the exercise.
Yeah. But they haven't quantified it, right? I have one of my customers, they
Exactly.
haven't quantified. So they say, yeah, my gut feel is I wanted to do, for example, one of them was AP and AR. I wanted to do that one because it's low hanging fruit, because I can see the benefits and they can quantify the complexity with the ERP system that they have is relatively low, but they didn't have they never made the time to quantify it, right. So they can put some dollar signs. And I think that's encouraging because that help out the owner, the CFO, and the team to move toward that goal, right? With some confidence that they have done the homework, right? Instead of just a gut feeling, right? Oh, I think we need to have this, right?
Yeah, and I think to talk back what I just said to your point, I'm sure there's plenty of projects that you thought were going to change the world, and then when you go look at it, kind of getting that order entry example, you're like, ah, I can save $500,000. But then when you do math, you're like, oh, I actually only have one person working on this, and so maybe, hey, maybe that's the wrong metric to be measuring, but also maybe it's not as big of opportunity as you thought it was going to be, and it's really helpful to be able to see that and say, oh, okay, I hadn't really done the math. I just spent all my time typing in orders, and so it felt really large to me.
Exactly. Or the complexity side, right? That's the other side. And
Or it's
talking
very hard
about,
to
or
fix.
the
Yeah.
complexity side, right? So I have one of my customers ask me, what about the complexity of this project? And I kind of have some idea, based on my previous experience in running distribution, and I say that is quite complex. You need to talk about this, about this, about this, about this, and that's something that he didn't have, in mind. I say just put those ones, and you can talk with this person and that person. But having this conversation, having a very organized way, is help out. So that will jump into the last one, which is what can you share with your executive team? So when you have done all that homework, right, you have a pitch, which is super simple because now you have all the building blocks, right, to make this happen, right? And again, on the example that we have been looking into, this what I put together. Again, all this is fictitious, right? But imagine that you go and you send an email or you have a conversation with an owner or with a CFO, whomever, and say, well, okay, this is the problem, the statement that we have. Very simple, very straightforward. This is the solution. We're going to implement a demand-driven inventory planning using profit-to-one forecasting module, external support visual setup, monthly review cadence, clear data stock throughout liquidation. That's all, right? So you already went through stuff and so forth, and they will ask you, have you looked into the opportunities? Have you looked into, different risks? Yes, let me show to you, right? They will see that you're organized for that. What is the impact? Oh, we have conservative 180K, aggressive, $500,000. And they can ask you, where do you get that math? So you can go over that one. What is the scoring that I have? I think the impact is 8 of 10 and the complexity is 6 of 10. That's what I put in this quadrant here. And if you go to something like this, I'm pretty sure any of the leadership that you have in your company are going to be like, what? Right? Because this is super simple for them to understand, what exactly that belongs to, right? What is the risk? So you put what is the risk that you have? What is the timeline? They will ask you about that, right? And what is the recommendation that you to have? That's pretty much. I'm pretty sure they're going to ask you for ROI, but here you will say, which one do you want me to choose? Conservative, moderate, or aggressive? You tell me what is it, right? And based on that, I will tell you, what is kind of the investment that you guys can have. So this is the discussion that everyone wanted to have. This is an easy conversation to have with any owner. And they may say no to it, but at least you have everything organized. Or as an owner, you can have discussion with your team, and it's going to be a much easier conversation because you have already arranged, everything that you have. So this is, plain vanilla is pretty much I would say the outcome, right, of all the work that you have done over this one. Uh, so I have a question for you, Cole. So when you talk with your customers and, they are trying to put, because you have champions, right, in your customer.
Hmm.
So it's not like you are talking with the owners all the time. And I know we have some people in the audience that actually they are, champions, right? They are the operations person or the pricing person or the sourcing person, and they wanted to do something like this, and they can maybe go over three or four of these, P's by themselves, right? But they are going to say, oh my gosh, when I wanted to put this together, right, and I need help in order to kind of get this stuff to the next step. What are the tips or the advice that you can give to them, that the champions, in order to do something like this?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things we've already talked about, but just to reiterate, I mean, one is having the story of how it's going to impact the business really clear. So the pitch piece that you just covered is a crucial portion of that, but showing the leadership team how it can improve areas outside of that direct business function. But hey, if we go and we work on our ability as a sourcing team to respond to quotes more quickly, that's going to free up sales team to spend more time on pricing, or that's going to free up the sales team to go out and respond to the customers more quickly and grow revenue. And so that's something that the leadership team might not be as interested on, kind of like the capacity freed up within the sourcing team, for better or for worse. But they're going to be really interested in knowing that it's going to also have downstream effects to the sales team. The other aspect I think is really important is working cross functionally. So if you are in charge of a specific department, making sure that the changes that you're proposing are going to be able to fit well into the plans of other departmental leaders. And the other piece there too is you're going to have their teams buy in. So I see that a lot. Like I said, for companies where they have sales and sourcing team, just going back to that example, if you have buy-in from both, now not only do you have two voices going to the leadership team saying, hey, this is important, but also the solution is something that's going to stick. Because the biggest problem I've seen is working on it from one functional focus, and then now another function within the business has a completely different idea on what they would like to do, and those two are going to clash. And then inevitably, a couple of years down the road, you're going to have to rework the whole thing. Maybe a couple of months down the road, you're going to have to rework the whole thing, and that's not a great solution. So, you know, I think being able to think larger picture is really what's going to be the best benefit there. But then also having the data to back it up is never going to hurt.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, awesome. All right, guys, as we promised, we covered, this in, 70 minutes. Thank you for staying with
It
us.
was a tight 70 minutes.
Yes, I mean, definitely, we made it through. So, I mean, we'll be sharing this video recording with you guys for the guys that attended the workshop. In that one, we'll be provide, calls and my, contact information in case you guys wanted to reach out. We know that some of you guys have some questions, but, maybe you don't want to put it out here for everyone to see it, and that's fine. You can reach out to us, and with confidence we can respond to you. And for those people watching these, offline, definitely same thing. You guys have our contact information. Please feel free to reach out, and happy to share with you guys the forms to fill it out. If you guys get stuck in anything, you have a question, a concern, feel free to reach out to us. I mean, Paul has been doing this for McKinsey for a couple of years. I've done it, back in my days in GE and now with my customers. So we feel your pain. We know this is not easy, but we wanted to put it out there for you guys to help you out to prioritize and get one or two projects, moving along. So I don't know. Final remarks, Cole, before we leave?
No, I appreciate the time and thanks for setting this up, Nelson. I think it's a really helpful way for folks to focus on what's actually important and kind of cut through the noise of all the different problems you might experience as an industrial distributor.
Yeah, definitely, man. No, thank you for your time, and thank you everyone for participating, and looking forward to talk to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.